All right. So yes, Ivan, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
We're very excited to hear about your story and especially your thinking around product and design. But I'd like to start off with how Japan influenced you and Notion at the beginning.
Yeah, there's a really interesting, now looking back, Japan is the country where Notion was reborn. I would say 3 years into the life of the company, we're struggling. We're running out of money. We're building on the wrong technical foundation. At that time, it's called, what is it called? Web component from Google. And we were betting on that technology instead of React, which eventually won. And so the products do a rewrite. And if we rewrite with the entire company, more likely we're gonna run out of money before we can finish the rewrite. So me and my co-founder, Simon, would just reset the company, lay off everybody, and decide to move to Japan for a little bit, Kyoto. And the reason for Kyoto is, well, neither of us has been to Japan before, but we always want to go. And as you know, cost of living in San Francisco is quite high. And Japan, especially Kyoto, is quite substantially cheaper. And so we can rent an Airbnb place, lease our apartment in San Francisco, and just working from a country that we've never been, and right after the dramatic event of laying off everyone. So we did that for a while and rebuilt the brand Notion from scratch. And so in a sense, Notion was reborn in Kyoto many years ago. Yeah.
What was that process like? So like, you decided to do everything from scratch and you moved to Kyoto. Like where did you get started? Like where did you get started in terms of how to think about product or design or customers?
We sort of at that time understand what we need to build. Like even the previous version of Notion, the product is similar. It's the technical implementation was different. The very early version of Notion is kind of like app builder. Think Xcode, but running in the browser. And that's the V1. The V2 version is the one that everybody used, roughly similar to the one everybody used today, the document, the notes, the task management. By building around the wrong foundation, then we rebuilt that in React, the modern stack. I will say the largest transition actually happened before Kyoto, which is from the Xcode version of Notion to the Microsoft Office version of Notion. And that came from realization of not everybody wants to be one wants to build apps, and most people just want to solve their problem in front of them. And the most common tools people use solving problem is Microsoft Office. You write a document, create a spreadsheet, manage your database in Access, and but those tools hasn't fundamentally changed for many decades. And so let's create a better version of it so everybody can use. And then hide a programming tool, software Xcode inside this Microsoft Office. That's pretty much our product approach. It has still been the product approach today. And yeah, so it's a product that everybody can use. That has been a principle.
Did you have like a specific person in mind when you were thinking about this? Like a type of person or what sort of role that person is?
I would say it's fairly general. Like even just like everybody can use Microsoft Office, from students to largest enterprises. And at that time, I wasn't as good about product, the business sense yet. And I think slowly getting better with the product sense, moving from Xcode to Microsoft Office. But it wasn't defined with persona or jobs to be done, all those framework to think about product. It's still just Office hasn't been evolved for so long. Let's build a better version of it. And somehow squeezing the computing programming tool inside of that metaphor. So it's very general purpose way of thinking about it. As we're doing become more a business, people would charge Notion, then I forced to learn the business side of building a product, and now start thinking about what's the job to be done, what's the persona, what are the core use cases. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm
always
curious.
an evolution. It's not like didn't have all those ideas early on. No, I still don't have a lot of the business and keep learning about it every day. So
Wow, it's it's phenomenal how Notion is evolving daily, right? I love seeing just the updates and the new features that you guys always release. But no, it's amazing story. I'm curious to hear more about like how Kyoto has influenced you. So like, were there any values or maybe concepts that influenced the way you thought about like building the product or running a company or even life in general?
attention to detail, the craftsmanship of everything. I would say before working from Japan, I care about details, but living in a city like Kyoto, it touches you every day. Even fairly simple life, the pace is not that fast, and everybody does things really, really well. Like the udon shop next to where we live is fairly normal neighborhood, but people are just so dedicated to, even a small udon shop, and that thing really we want to bring into the product. And the craftsmanship is definitely one part of our product team. We repeatedly stress about that. The other part is hospitality. Just a mindset to SaaS essentially means software as a service. Service translates into hospitality ties into service. So not only providing a product, but the human side of things around the product means support, sales, customer success. And how do we approach this, not in a transactional way, but in a way that really make the person feel good, make the person feel welcome, like a hotel, like a ryokan, right? And it's like full service, everything taken care of. You don't have to think about anything, right? How do we do that with software? I don't think has properly done so far. Restaurant industry does it, hospitality industry does it, airline industry does it, but not in software industry. So
true.
There's a lot more to be done there.
Wow, interesting. And I can see like, so Camille has sent me like photos of your office. It looks super cozy, like a home. I'm curious, like if you had like a very specific vision around how you design your office or how you design your organization.
Yeah, well, I use the same furniture in my office as my apartment, or vice versa. My apartment used the same furniture, just larger quantity. My office used larger quantity, like the benches, the couch. So definitely wanted to feel cozy. It's like there's no top light. Everything should be fairly warm. The office feels very, it could feel like white and cold and not welcoming. Well, for the one Notion office, I want to feel like people take off shoes, just like people come to a Japanese home. And you don't have to worry about, you can sit anywhere almost. Should have that vibe. And having a comfortable, cozy vibe, then people can be more creative. People can brainstorm all the time. Those are really connected. It's not just a work. It's very much about a studio, an artist studio, and people have lunch together, kind of like a family or artist studio hybrid. That's what we're going after.
You mentioned that like everything's connected. I'm curious, like, so you mentioned hospitality and attention to detail. These are values that really influence the way you think about running a company and building products. I'm curious, like how do you enforce that, like as an organization, or how do you get everyone to have those values?
It's really hard. I wouldn't say we figured it out yet. Hiring the right people is definitely by far the easiest one. So it's easier to find a person rather than change someone, right? That's one. Write it down. So we have 5 company values. The one with craftsmanship, we have one called quality with speed. So we want to move fast like a startup, but at the same time without losing the quality. And it's constant struggle. How do you balance those two, right? So the one we're okay giving up is the quantity, doing fewer things but do it better. So principle like that will help. And just like be a good role model. I care about the stuff in the office to be high quality. So when people touch them, and now we're all in COVID and working from home, but while everybody in the office having lunch together every day, sitting on their desk, they touch the high quality thing. They use pens that are well designed, hopefully inspire everyone to create such tools for other people. Right? So all those things are tied together and tell a good story too. So we aspire to be a great product and brands and solution that can last not just a couple of years like most software solution, but can we do it on a decade level? And so what's that story? What is that positioning? And is that inspirational? And I wouldn't say we've done a good job for either of those things that I just mentioned, but it's a constant reminding of myself, we need to do better here.
I'd love to hear like what's the current kind of story that you have with Notion, like why you're doing Notion, and you mentioned like thinking in decades, right? So what's the aspect and story or aspiration around that?
Well, multi-decade might be too long. Like 1 decade is good. I've been working on the project for about 1 decade now. So what's the story? Story come back to computing. I think like you and me speaking through this very expensive MacBook Pro $2,000 machine, but actually in the world, how many people can unleash the full power of this? Very few. Those people are programmers. People are software designer, developers, and create tools with this medium, right? So majority of the world are still running on Microsoft Office, which is essentially fancy typewriter or fancy ledgers in the spreadsheet sense. So how can we unleash this machine's power to more people? Software tool making. And that's the central theme of the company. And that's why I go back to the earlier example, we're talking about Xcode. Bring Xcode in the browser. That's the very first version of Notion. So that's the goal. And how do we go about with it? It just takes a long time. Right now, the Notion everybody's using is the Microsoft Office version, but it doesn't have to be this way, right? Maybe in a parallel universe, the Xcode version of Notion could exist and simple enough to use, and more people can be a software maker that way.
So you believe that tool making is super important in order to really unleash the potential of computing and computers and those kind of things.
Yeah, like computing as a medium, I think it's a fairly special thing. It's like printing once every 500 years medium, right? Reading and writing as human language as a medium once 10,000 years medium. Computing probably every 200 years medium. And so it's a special thing. It's not social media maybe once a decade type of thing, right? So it's a special thing, and in the 500-year spectrum, let's say, then it takes a long time for the general population to enjoy the power of this medium. You can do it through education, like learning how to code, which many people do nowadays, which is awesome. That takes a long time. And I would say, and I believe in, there's a lot more we can do by making the medium better, more accessible, making better tools for this medium, so more people can participate in creating things in this medium, which is the approach we're trying to do with Notion. So on the surface, probably feels like a productivity tool, but I was saying it's hard. It's about computing or software tool making as a medium, and how can we unleash that? That's always been the case.
Interesting. I think one super interesting, I guess, concept about Notion is everything's sort of like blocks, right? So it's like whenever you add a field or add an element, it's like adding blocks to your sheet or document. I'm curious, like what inspired you to have this sort of like block-like concept?
It's actually a legacy coming. Well, there's multiple sources. It's kind of fuzzy what exactly was the source. In the earlier computing system, Smalltalk, which is one of the Xerox Alto was running on, everything's object. And you can think it's that way. Modern object-oriented programming is sort of based on that, right? So in Notion, everything's a block that you can apply actions to those blocks, which means select multiple things and move them around, delete them or duplicate them or turn a block into some other type of block. Those are just actions on the blocks. So kind of similar to Smalltalk way. And there's also another lineage come from the web component, which is the original technology that Notion was based on, and talking about, software can be distributed as packages, and people can take pieces, and either developers or end user can compose them together and making their own software. Some from there too. So it's not really, I wouldn't say it's original idea. It's just like combine those ideas together and find a constraint on how to design a text editor that works for most people. When all those things work together, that's the modern block framework for Notion. So it's fairly easy to create things like columns and layouts, and you can turn things from to-do lists into toggles or bullet lists.
No, it's amazing how you can make the slash button so powerful, right? It's just hit slash and you can pretty much do anything, and it's pretty amazing. I think the concept and the usability. At this point, you probably get like crazy amount of feature requests. You have a lot of different types of users coming from all over the world with different sort of purposes and missions and things they want to do with Notion. Like, how do you think about prioritizing which features to take or even which features to reject?
Yeah, it's really hard. I wouldn't say we figured out yet. So Notion, many personal users use Notion, but a lot of large enterprise companies runs on Notion, and many startup. I think most of your audience are probably startup people, and it's a good tool for startup too. So from personal to SMB startups to large enterprise, they all have different feature requests, and balance them is tricky. I think just the mindset have to listen to people. Actually, we do have some kind of system, which is every inbounding request, whether it's from Twitter or support or sales calls, we try to tag them. We have an internal tagging database of hundreds of entries. We know like, okay, roughly what person is talking about for this request. And every day and every week we tally those requests, and we see the trends based on what the tags count from day to and week to week. And that's the bottom up. That's what the market is telling us what they want. Hopefully we capture well through the tagging database. And on the top down, it's like fundamentally we want to create, business-wise Microsoft Office, romantic size, the computing tool for everyone. So that's what we want to take the product to. So that becomes a constant struggle of what we want and what the market tell us, and find the sweet spot, and from top down and bottom up. So it's very vague, but I wouldn't say we have a good way beyond that, but then just a lot of intuition and guessing.
And I'm guessing there's a lot of discussion around like what requests to take and those kind of things. So is there like a specific, like a committee or like a team composition around like who decides the direction on and what to build?
The company is still very small. I wouldn't say we have a committee for this. There are about 20 people building the product for Notion. So very small, and most of the engineers we hire are very product-centric people. All the designer we hire, they are also double as engineers. So, and have good product business sense. So everybody understand the product and have a say in the product direction. And of course, I see my view as sort of like editor of everyone's opinion, keep it more opinionated. And that's the part where I still figuring out how to operating as a company that beyond 20, 30 people in the product.
And one of your values you mentioned is around quality. How do you enforce quality or make sure that high quality is maintained throughout building and delivering the features?
I try to use every feature going out of the door, and we dog food is another way to say internally Notion runs on Notion. Notion, the only tool we use is email for external communication, Slack for internal communication, and everything else pretty much runs on Notion. So for many of the more important features, we try to use for weeks, if not a month, before we release out to the world. And we have a really large community, Japan included, a huge community of people who want to early test the product features. So yeah, all those things help. And then just be very honest with ourselves. Is this a good thing? Like if you can look at it, touch it, use it, and is this quality stuff? If it's not, let's go back to drawing board and try it again. You know? And sometimes you need to balance for speed, but oftentimes we'll try to lean towards the quality side of things.
So one of the things probably, it's, Notion's your baby, and you have a strong vision and probably a very, very high bar for quality with the product. I'm curious, like, this is another hard question, but where are you stubborn on, and where are you flexible on when it comes to building products or building out features?
One framework we use internally, I think this is pretty common. It's is that a decision reversible or irreversible? So if that decision is irreversible, like for example, something like pricing kind of reversible, something like designing a new permission model, making Notion free, which we did, many personal part of Notion free, which launched like four months ago. Those are rather irreversible decisions. So let's be really, really careful about them. Right? So stumble about quality on those decisions, and exploring all the possible decision outcomes for this. But for most decisions, it's actually really reversible. So tweaking the marketing page, plenty, I would say majority decision that you can change later. Therefore, just go for it, and optimize for the speed side instead of the quality side. I think it's a good framework to think about this. At least that's how we use internally. So for things like recruiting, hiring someone, it's really hard to change. So better think damn hard about it. For something tweaking a UI interface type of thing, which you can always change. That's the nice thing about SaaS, right? You can always tweak your software tomorrow if you want to. So let's go for it.
Nice. And you're pretty involved in the hiring process then?
I am. I interview everyone.
So, and what qualities do you look for personally?
Well, the company value thing I mentioned, and for different roles, it's quite different. Engineer products that we constantly looking for a product sense. So the company values are always start with users, put users first. Second one, quality with speed. How do you balance those two? Number 3, it's feedback. It's a gift. Notion is a fairly direct culture, so we give each other feedback and we can learn from each other. Number 4 is dedication. So just like the hospitality and craft, we really care about giving it out for the work, and it's very contagious as a team. Right? The last one is integrity, called front page integrity test. Like many of the irreversible decisions, touches on user trust, which is once you violate the trust, it's really hard to take it back. So making many decisions as if that decision is on the front page of New York Times, are you okay with that? Right? If you're not okay with that, think again about that decision. So those are the 5 company values, and we try to use them during our recruiting process to align with the candidate, see if they align with the candidate on the culture side of things. And of course, there are talent side of things, your experience, your skill. Are you a good engineer, designer, salesperson? And we try not to lower the bar in terms of the talent. If anything, we try to raise the bar as the company gets larger, which is really hard. There's almost only so many people with that experience and skill set you can hire from. And it's always easy just to lower the bar a little bit to fill the role, but we try not to do that.
I like the idea of front page tests. So imagine that your decision is on the front page of New York Times. I think that's That's a interesting, really way to think about things whenever you make big decisions.
Yeah, it's actually it's not original. Stripe uses this.
Mm.
Some microsystem uses this back in the days. So
Okay.
actually a good handy way to think about the integrity part of the problem.
Mm-mm-mm. And you said that you've transitioned or transitioning into having a stronger business sense around building the company. Like what are some things recently that you've sort of struggled or had to really adopt in terms of the way of thinking?
Actually, going back to your earlier point, right? More like what kind of customer feedback do you take? And since Notion can be used by so many different kind of people and companies, so the tricky part is how do we balance those enterprise requests? Right now, there's really large customers knocking on the door. Would you build this enterprise feature? Therefore, we can adopt Notion company-wide. That's one. And there's the small teams requests, and which are many of that's where Notion was from, and that's our most devoted customer base. And how do we balance those two? It's very hard. I wouldn't say we understand yet. And there it's right now we have a sizable. We're building a sales team, and sales team needs enterprise features to provide to larger customers, and it takes a while to ramp up, right? Learn the product, learn the playbook. So they actually have a time lag. So when you ship a major enterprise feature, then maybe a couple months from now, they can start deploying this in the processes. So it's not as real time as just pushing out software in the cloud and everything works by next hour. So learning play the time lag while balancing the SMB use cases, enterprise use cases. Those is fairly new for me. And yeah, pretty much how to use sales as part of go-to-market. That's and working with a fairly general purpose software tool like Notion. Building a general purpose software tool like Notion, it's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it must be very tricky.
It's fun. That's the fun part.
Yeah, I'm sure. And if you're able to make it adopt in, with different use cases and different customer segments, then that'll be quite amazing. Love to hear more about just like your favorite use cases at Notion and or even some unique use cases that you've seen of how people have used Notion.
Well, I have a sake database, so I sort of taking photo of the one that I haven't tried and store them, and now eventually evolve into wine, including wine and beer, but I still call it sake database. So that's my personal use case. I would say the primary three use cases that most common for Notion are document and notes, and wiki for companies and project management for companies. And those are the three we'll try to focus on and do a really good job. And so nothing special about them, but the fact that Notion can do all three use cases decently well, it's one of our strengths, and try to double down on that.
And I've also heard that people have been using also for like COVID-19 measures as well.
Very much so, yeah. I think it's pretty inspirational during the beginning of COVID. By the way, we have nonprofit program for all the nonprofits and the first responders, not just COVID related. So feel free to email us at team@makenotion.com, and we're gonna connect you with the program. At the beginning of this, COVID happened. There's a lot of first responders, hospital use Notion to organize masks and supplies, and it's really while we're all locked up at home and see the software building being used to solve the problem in the world, that feels really the team feels really good about it. And that also shows again that building a general purpose tool can really help people in a much more higher leveraged way rather than just building a very specific software. Going back to the earlier tool making point.
Yeah. Why do you think people love your product? I mean, like, this is another hard full-blown question maybe, but like it's I feel like there's a lot of love. You see it almost everywhere on Twitter, on YouTube, and even people around me, right? And it's amazing that people talk about it all the time. But why do you think there's so much energy and love around your product?
Well, we put a lot of love into the product ourselves. Start with. The quality is pretty good. It could be a lot better actually, but we think the quality of product is good. We try to simplify it without dumb it down too much. And the brand is good too, I would say. Like we try to incorporate a lot more of art into the brand, not just another software service. Try to keep it human. So I think that helped generating the community love, and those very devoted Notion users then brings more people into the community. And yeah, the last piece I would say is the flexibility, going back to the making thing. So because the product is fairly open-ended, people can use for their own purposes, then they like to show people, right? It's kind of like if you, I don't know if you have people went to a Lego convention, like because Lego is so open-ended, whatever in those conventions, people showcase what they built into larger world or on YouTube, it has a sense of pride there and sense of accomplishment, sense of creativity. And that toolmakerness opened up the computing, opened up the laptop we use every day to be something like, dear and close to your problem that you face every day, and you like to show people about it. And in a sense, people reciprocate that once they see it. Right?
That's true. I mean, I can definitely see that. Like if you built like an amazing task management kind of process on Notion, you kind of want to show it off, right? Because it's almost like an artwork. Was there anything strategic that you did like around like community or making sure that there, people have a voice into the product and those kind of things?
We definitely put a lot of effort in it. There's an ambassador program called Notion Pro. And before COVID, or even during COVID, those are the people around the world organizing Notion events, either in physical space or virtually. And actually, we launched in Korea not long ago. And the Korean launch was largely helped by 2 Notion Pros. Without their help, we wouldn't be able to launch in that country that easily, probably not at all. And so that program was took a lot of effort to coordinate and has a really good payoff and give a direct connection from the company to the community. And we're actually trying to expanding that program more. Yeah, that's something we did consciously. Other things, just be very authentic on social media like Twitter, like Reddit. To try not to sound like a big company, just try to sound like a toolmaker and someone building the product, talking with their users directly and taking every feedback very seriously. And I think all those things are helping nurturing the community. Right?
True. One thing I thought that was unique is like I think almost every employee has like a what do you call it, like a drawing of themselves, and everyone uses it as their profile photos on like every social media. Like, was there something intention? Was there any intention around that, or?
I did a lot of photography in college, and I was thinking doing visual art photography for maybe as a career, and eventually got into software and design and engineering. In photography, one idea is like if you show the face if you take a photo and show the face, and it's less likely. Well, if you take a photo and don't show the face and show other parts of the person, then it's easier to associate yourself with that. And therefore, I'm trying to avoid faces, like real photos faces as part of Notion's identity, whether as part of our brand or our about page. And so create sort of like a distance from the viewers and with the product and our about page, we don't have photos of people's real faces. So jobs page, then you can envision yourself working at Notion because you see the photos, you see the avatars, but you don't actually see real faces. So I think these things play nicely together. The tricky part is the company slowly growing, become larger and larger. So our illustrator has to work extra hard to draw.
That's true. It's part of the onboarding process where you have to draw that person's face.
Yeah, but it does create a unified sense, identity of the company. Because if you take photos, the exposures never match up, the color never match up. You feels like, oh, it's just another photo. But if it's drawn as an illustration, then it's very uniform. You can control the thickness of the line. You can control the background color. You feel like you're talking to the Notion as a singular brand rather than just someone on sales or support on the other end.
It's interesting to hear that it feels like everything's really connected. Like, so how you want the external to feel and how you want the internal to feel, it feels like there's great connection there in terms of the values and small things like having illustrations on their profile photos and those kind of things.
Yeah, another unofficial company value is the importance of holisticness. Just like you mentioned, most problems are connected. And what's the holistically the most optimal solution? To me, that's one of the true innovations of any solution. It's combining the art and science and other dimensions together, right? Find the best outcome. And for example, when we hire designers, we try to look for people who can also code. So have engineers and actually know the technical constraint. So when they design a solution, if it's too hard to design, they might just offload to a different type of tech stack and find something that's easier to program or vice versa. And by understanding more part of the constraint, you can have an easier solution, a more holistic solution. And that's something we really believe in at Notion.
I'd love to spend just the last couple of minutes just ask you one, like as a CEO of a company, like what were some things that were hard for you to really that took quite some effort for you to adopt and actually put into play in terms of the way you run companies or the way you manage people and those kind of things?
There's too many.
Every
month there's almost it's like a metaphor I like to use. It's kind of like snake going through different skins. Every 6 months you have to go through a different skin to learn a brand new way of running a company, building a product. And just like gradually for myself, I'm slowly transitioning from just designing or building a product to designing and building a company. That's a big one. And but at the same time, I can create a lot of value by really go deep with the products side of things. I still do a lot of product design, very hands-on. So how do I balance my attention while mentoring people in the company, offloading my contacts to other people, like more talented people than I am, and while running design a company as holistically, all the different level of abstraction changes. This is hard, and I don't really say I figured it out yet. So,
what was? I mean, year 2020 has been an interesting year, I'm sure, for everyone, and especially for you as well. What were some like breakthroughs, or what was a sort of memorable moments that happened to you in 2020?
So this thing called COVID happened, of course. And that's it really changes how, how Notion so far has been a very in the office culture and on-site culture. And when COVID happened, we shift towards fully remote. That's total culture shock for us. It's like, even though we're designing a remote product, asynchronous collaboration product, but the building of this product is very much in the office. Decision-making, communication, having lunch together, building morale and culture is very much happening in the office. And learning how to transition that, which we're still in the middle of it, it's painful. And building the people ops function, which we just had a people starter who started this week, by the way. And and building those people side of the company, it's we're a little bit behind on that, but right now we're picking up the steam and make sure everybody is connected during COVID, and also making the product better. We improve the product, like collaboration, real-time sync type of thing in the beginning of the COVID to make us work better on Notion. So working remotely definitely being a challenge, and we're slowly learning how to adopt as a company.
Was there anything
while growing the business and growing the headcount?
Yeah. Was there anything that really worked out for you guys in terms of making sure there's cohesiveness remotely?
One company culture we had, ritual we had before COVID that we're still doing it every week is it's called Life Story. So every new hire, roughly after 1 month after they start, spend half an hour going through their entire life, from where they were born, who their parents were, and to the moment they arrive start at Notion. So that some people are very vulnerable with that and share everything, a lot of things in their life that's I think in many other places might consider too personal. And that vulnerability, it really formed the bond of us, even though many of new hire were never met in person. So that's a company ritual that has been fairly helpful, very helpful, and we try to keep it as long as possible.
Interesting. Do they present that at all hands meetings, or is it like in a blog format? How does that
every
work?
Friday we carve out time during every Friday during lunch we do a company virtual lunch together, and people will present their life stories.
Wow, that's a great, I think, bonding experience, and it's a great way to get to know someone, I think.
It's very much so, and people write their life story, present them in Notion, so you can always read the life story from people join Notion, join the company before you. So it's almost like reading people's mini bio. Have a database in Notion, employee directory database, and has all the life stories.
Wow, that's a great ritual. I think a lot of companies should adopt that, definitely. Just two last questions. I apologize, we're a little bit over time. But one is Japan, right? So like I believe like it's one of your first hires outside of the US, I believe, right? I'm curious why Japan, and what made you take that step?
Yeah, we recently hired Mr. Katsu Nishi. And who will be our sales and marketing hire in Japan. First, we just love this country. It's like just ties with how Notion was born. That's one. But from the business angle, it's second. I think still the second largest SaaS market, software market outside US. So, and really requires someone on the ground understand the culture, understand the network and the ecosystem to build out business. You cannot just like UK and US and just set up legal entity and call it a day. So, and yeah, all things considered, Notion is a fairly international, our user base is very international. So there's already so many large company and community adopting Notion here in Japan. And so it's about time to set up a proper entity here and to serve them better.
Well, I'm really excited to have you guys in Japan, and I'm sure the Japan audience will be will be well receptive of your initiatives in Japan.
Yeah. We're very excited too. Whenever like COVID finish, hopefully we can do a proper launch in.
Yes. Yeah. We'll love to do it in Japan, especially in Kyoto. Yeah. And then one last question is do you have any kind of closing words or messages or lessons that you want to share with aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in the software market?
Yeah. I think go back to your first, when you're opening, maybe it's before this recording, you were talking about Japan is fairly new at building software, right? I think there's so many good quality of Japan that's should be reflected in software building, the craftsmanship, the hospitality in terms of service. Those are such a strength of this country, and it should be showing more in the software product that people build here. And how do people Japan tap into that? I think it will be very natural and will be very interesting. Right? So, and I'm looking forward to see that more.
That's definitely true. I think we should definitely go back to our roots and go back to our original values, right? And try to incorporate that into technology and the way we build software. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ivan. It was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.